Dozens of suspects have been charged and are awaiting trial. 2 law enforcement officers were among those arrested. The investigation is expected to last many months or longer. Martin Brunt, Sky News.
They thought they were untouchable. They were already exposed. A cocaine distribution network dismantled through encrypted messages. A prison employee who crossed the line for a jailed drug trafficker, and a violent crew who trapped a man on a Nottingham road. Different crimes, same mistake. Police surveillance had begun years earlier, long before any of them realized they were under investigation. Our opening narrative focuses on a syndicate that designed its enterprise to appear completely mundane. On paper, the firms involved seemed like authentic commercial entities specializing in the logistics and hauling sector. They managed warehousing, the transit of merchandise, and standard logistics, the type of industry that draws zero suspicion when managed properly. Transport moved consistently. Sites were rented through official channels, and nothing regarding the public-facing business hinted at illicit behavior. To the public, these corporations operated identically to any other player in the field. Shipments were logged, billing was processed, operators stuck to fixed itineraries, and trucks crossed county lines without triggering any red flags. This wasn't a disorganized gang. It was built around specific roles where every individual held a precise rank in the command structure. At the heart of this ring were Christopher Dean and Paul Connolly. Together, they supervised the wholesale purchase and sale of high-purity cocaine. Dean functioned as the primary strategist. He dictated the supply and distribution logic while remaining physically detached from the narcotics and digital traffic. We will explore this further in a moment. Paul Connolly took charge of the daily management of the business. He served as the bridge between the leadership and the broader network. While Dean established the strategy, Connolly ensured its execution. Their influence wasn't restricted to a single town. Their reach spanned several territories, with vehicles moving between counties under the guise of regular industrial hauling. Working alongside the leadership was Christopher Boland, who occupied a pivotal and multifaceted role. We will look closer at him later in the program. At a lower tier was Cameron Ruddy. Ruddy served as a facilitator. He handled incoming requests, managed physical currency and drugs for the group, and guarded stock intended for further sale. He also organized samples for prospective clients and helped with massive shipments when necessary. His role was strictly functional, not strategic. At that stage, there was no obvious reason for police to step in. There were no formal reports, no public altercations, and no visible violations to attract the law. However, while the facade seemed solid, its longevity rested on one precarious belief: that their private chats remained impenetrable. Digital traffic within the group relied on specialized secure devices, primarily EncroChat terminals. Paul Connolly utilized the EncroChat alias WordJ, which functioned as the central communications hub for the syndicate. Using this profile, Connolly spoke with vendors, buyers, and field agents, passing down orders from Christopher Dean while shielding Dean from any direct exposure. Dean's purposeful rejection of encrypted tech was a tactical decision aimed at keeping his identity away from the digital evidence trail. The data traded on EncroChat was purely technical rather than social. The logs were brief, precise, and businesslike. Weights, costs, meeting spots, and schedules were handled via coded terms that avoided mentioning drugs, cash, or real names. As their confidence in this secure platform solidified, so did the magnitude and regularity of their crimes. The product driving the enterprise was high-grade Class A cocaine. The drug was procured and transported in bulk quantities rather than small-time street deals. The prosecution stated that transactions occurred in multi-kilogram bricks, with the supply chain organized to stock other distributors rather than end users. This was not random dealing. It was a methodical, recurring, and large-scale operation. Christopher Boland was the pivot for this phase of the enterprise. He was in charge of securement of bulk cocaine and organizing its transit via reliable associates. Recovered logs showed Boland ordering several kilograms simultaneously, then managing how those batches were divided, hidden, and moved onward. The narcotics were never stored in a single permanent spot. Instead, the cocaine and the profits were cycled through temporary depots to minimize the threat of a raid and to prevent detectable patterns during police stakeouts. These spots were picked for their convenience and cover rather than total seclusion. Sites associated with Boland's authentic waste disposal firm were instrumental. Yards, industrial units, and trucks linked to skip hire work were used to hide drugs and money. These settings permitted constant traffic without raising eyebrows, as workers, trucks, and deliveries were already part of the daily commercial flow. The transit followed a similar pattern. Cocaine was moved in vehicles that seemed like they were doing standard delivery work. Couriers used roads common for legitimate freight, often crossing regions without any erratic behavior that would alert highway patrol. This strategy minimized risk at every turn, but it also created a weakness. By that time, the group was no longer flying under the radar. The very tactics used to shield the network were being used by detectives to map it out. The pivotal moment in the probe occurred when international authorities managed to penetrate the EncroChat system. From that second, those secret messages were no longer confidential. They were being harvested in real time and archived for forensic study. Investigators managed to pull massive amounts of historical data, allowing them to rebuild chains of command that spanned many months. These weren't just random snippets, but full dialogues revealing how transactions were set up, the volumes discussed, and crucially, how duties were assigned across the hierarchy. Trends surfaced rapidly once the files were scrutinized. Surveillance teams were sent out to verify what the digital logs were indicating. Physical activity perfectly mirrored what was being typed in the chats. Vehicles tied to the ring took routes that made sense for the logistics work mentioned on EncroChat. People were seen gathering at spots mentioned indirectly in the logs. By merging the digital files with physical tracking, detectives moved from theories to absolute proof. The group's organization, ranks, and tactics were no longer mysteries. They were logged, confirmed, and backed by multiple layers of proof. With the walls closing in on their digital secrets and their travel mapped, the law was ready to strike, moving the investigation from a passive watch to active enforcement. Simultaneous raids were carried out at various spots tied to the syndicate, focusing on both private homes and locations linked to their front businesses. Authorities apprehended the primary targets, including Christopher Dean, Paul Connolly, Christopher Boland, and Cameron Ruddy. The search of these homes and industrial sites yielded heavy evidence. Officers confiscated massive amounts of Class A cocaine prepared for wholesale trade. Stacks of cash were also seized, representing the gains from their illicit trades. Trucks and cars used by the group were impounded, including vehicles involved in their daily commercial facades. Digital hardware, data drives, and paperwork were also taken, further proving the network's inner workings. By the time the handcuffs were on, the police already had a comprehensive map of the whole plot. With the ring broken and the leaders in cells, the emphasis turned toward the courtroom, where the EncroChat logs would serve as the backbone of the case. The legal proceedings wrapped up at Bolton Crown Court, where the state detailed the scope of the plot and the specific actions of each man. As we noted, the court heard that the inquiry was spearheaded by elite detectives from the Greater Manchester Police Challenger Division in Wigan. Every defendant admitted their guilt regarding their roles in the syndicate. While issuing the sentences, the judge pointed out the intricate nature of the ring. The court noted that using real firms as a shield and maintaining a professional facade were factors that made the crime worse, not better. Christopher Dean confessed to the conspiracy and was handed a term of 12 years and 9 months. Paul Connolly admitted to his role in the supply ring, possession with intent to distribute, and holding illegal property. He also received 12 years and 9 months. Christopher Boland pleaded guilty to the supply plot and holding criminal funds, receiving an 11-year and 3-month sentence. Cameron Ruddy admitted to his role in the conspiracy, specifically regarding major shipments like a 15-kilogram batch headed for Lancashire, and was given 6 years. Altogether, the quartet was sentenced to over 4 decades in custody, terminating the operation. With that case finished, we moved to the next, where a betrayal of trust occurred not in a gang, but within the walls of the prison itself. Megan Breen entered the custodial service as a young adult, starting her career in the summer of 2021. At 21 years old, she began a role that placed her within high security zones and demanded a total commitment to professional distance. She held a position as an operational support worker, a role that, while not a uniformed officer, still required constant interaction with the prison population and access to restricted sectors. Her shifts were divided between 2 connected sites in Gwent. One was HMP Prescode, an open Category D facility housing men finishing their terms and preparing for society. The second was HMP Usk, a closed Category C prison for adult males, including high-risk individuals and those jailed for violent crimes. Despite the different security tiers, both sites shared a single management team and a rotating staff. During her training, Breen was explicitly cautioned about the dangers of unprofessional ties with inmates. The court later noted that this instruction specifically highlighted the risks of coercion, power dynamics, and the heavy criminal penalties for crossing those lines. By the time this case started to unravel, Breen was 22, working across both facilities, and fully aware of the statutes regarding inmate contact. And it was during these regular shifts in a place founded on surveillance and discipline that the first secret communications began to take hold. The inmate at the heart of this scandal was not named in the press, but his criminal history was made very clear. He had been sentenced in late 2020 for a conspiracy involving Class A drugs, receiving a term of 4 years and 4 months. His crime categorized him as a serious organized trafficker rather than a street-level dealer. In mid-2021, while serving that time, he was moved to the open prison system to help him transition back to life outside. This was the window during which he met Megan Breen through her duties. By the time their romance started, he was already enjoying loosened restrictions, such as home visits and day releases, benefits reserved only for those deemed a low threat. The prosecution noted that the relationship blossomed over a specific window between February and May of 2022. This wasn't a pre-existing friendship that started before Breen took the job. Their chats quickly moved past professional talk. Breen used a prison-provided Nokia handset that the inmate was allowed to use while on release, and they also traded messages on Snapchat, a service famous for self-deleting content. Authorities later found proof of constant talking across both platforms. The tone of these chats was described as clearly romantic. Recovered logs contained words of endearment, declarations of love, and various heart symbols. The data showed a deep personal bond, rather than a simple lapse in professional judgment. The romance eventually moved outside the digital world. Breen set up a meeting with the inmate while he was on a home release, travelling to Merseyside to spend personal time with him. The court was told the trip happened around her 20th birthday, and they spent a night together in a local hotel. While in Merseyside, Breen even mingled with the inmate's relatives. She met them publicly and later confessed she had seen them several times. It was this move from secret texts to physical dates that turned a work violation into a criminal act, leading the case toward a public scandal. The risk-taking continued to grow. On one occasion, the inmate joined Breen for a social outing with 2 of her co-workers from the prison staff. Those colleagues had no idea who he really was and didn't realize the person they were drinking with was a convict serving time. The court later noted that this put those workers in a terrible situation, as they were unknowingly hanging out with a person who should never have been in that environment. By bringing a prisoner into a social circle with prison employees without warning them, Breen shattered a fundamental boundary. What started as hidden messages had now put others in jeopardy, damaged the service's reputation, and erased the line between jail and the outside world. And it was only after these lines were crossed multiple times that the truth finally reached the administrators inside the prison walls. The secret was revealed because Breen herself let it slip. In early 2022, she told a co-worker, William Morgan, about her recent travels to Liverpool. During that talk, she admitted she had met a guy, stayed over with him, and that he was actually a prisoner from Prescode. When Morgan showed surprise and doubt, Breen proved it by pointing to the man's official file on a prison computer screen, confirming the person she was dating was a currently jailed inmate. Morgan didn't hesitate to tell the supervisors. From that point, Breen lost all control of the situation. The prison leadership moved fast, and Breen was removed from her post in March 2022 as a criminal inquiry began. As part of that probe, officers went through the inmate's living space. There, they found a note with Breen's phone number and her Snapchat handle. This find provided the physical link needed to connect the inmate to a staff member. Detectives then searched Breen's phone, which proved they had been in constant contact for months. Along with the misconduct probe, Breen was also investigated for improper use of a computer for checking prison data during the affair. Although that specific charge was eventually set aside, it contributed to the overall picture of how she broke the rules. With the probe finished and the files ready, the focus moved from the investigation to the courtroom and the fallout that would follow. The legal case went to Cardiff Crown Court, where Megan Breen confessed to the charge of misconduct in a public role. The judge heard details about Breen's personal life in her defense. She was described as a solo parent with the main duty of raising a young child. It was also revealed that she was expecting a baby at the time of the hearing and was looking after another child as well. Her lawyers argued that a prison term would hurt the children, relying on her more than it would hurt Breen herself. The ruling was given by Tracy Lloyd Clark, who stated that the crime was grave and that Breen knew her actions were illegal. Breen was given a 10-month sentence, which was suspended for 18 months. She was also made to pay £500 in legal fees and finish 15 days of mandatory rehabilitation work. With the legal matter closed, we turn to our final story, one marked not by office secrets, but by a sudden burst of coordinated cruelty on a street in Nottingham. Our final story starts with a trade that looked normal on the surface, but was a trap designed from the beginning. A listing went up for expensive merchandise, described in the case as laptops and high-end electronics. The post was managed by Ionel Radu, who was later named as the mastermind of the plot. He wasn't present for the physical strike, which we will look at shortly, but he was the one who planned exactly how and where the crime would occur. The price looked like a fair private deal, good enough to interest a buyer, but not so low that it seemed like a scam. There was no immediate reason to worry about the deal. They talked, set the price, and picked a time to meet. What the buyer didn't suspect was that the ad was a complete lie. There were no computers and no products for sale. The only reason for the post was to lure a target into a trapped setting where others were already waiting. Per Radu's orders, the spot was picked in the Meadows, a housing area south of the city centre. They chose Hope Close because it was hard to see into and had quick exits. The time was set for late afternoon on February 27th, 2025, when the normal local traffic would help the group stay hidden. Radu had help. He brought in a team from London to handle the physical side of the crime. He came to town with George Sherita, Kostel Ili, Ion Stoica, and Mihai Melu. Every man had a job for when the victim arrived. We will break those down in a minute. The group used a car with stolen plates, a tactical move to stop people from identifying them and to stay away from police cameras. Digital records later proved they had scouted the town the day before, driving through the meadows to find the best routes and the best place for the trap. The victim was told to come by himself. He arrived with roughly £7,000 in cash and was wearing a Rolex watch worth about £11,000. These were things the gang already knew. The court later noted that making sure the victim was alone was a key part of the plan to prevent any fight back. The ad had worked, and what came next wasn't a sale, but a violent ambush. On the day of the mugging, the whole plan relied on a lie. Radu told the buyer that his teenage son would be the one to finish the sale. That part was played by George Charita. When the victim pulled up on Hope Close, Charita was the first person he saw. Charita had been parked there specifically to greet the target. Following his script, he stayed relaxed and helpful, telling the victim where to park and promising that the deal would be over in a few seconds. Charita then walked the victim away from the main road and into a narrow passage behind some houses near a closed-down shop. This path took the victim out of public view and right into the spot where the rest of the gang was hiding. The moment the victim stepped into the passage, everything changed. Ionut Stoica and Kostel Ili jumped out from behind him. These two were named as the muscle of the operation. One of them pulled a blade, immediately turning the meeting into a nightmare and proving there were no laptops for sale. The violence started without a word. The victim was struck and kicked, shoved to the pavement and held down. During the struggle, he was stabbed in his arm, taking a deep wound while the gang kept shouting threats at him. The judge later ruled that the cruelty was planned and purposeful, not an accident. While Stoica and Ili handled the beating, Mihai Melu helped out, staying close to control the situation while the others went through the victim's pockets. As the man lay bleeding, the gang searched him. They grabbed the cash, totaling several £1,000s, and tore the Rolex from his wrist. The robbery was surgical. They only took the valuables they knew he was carrying. The strike stopped suddenly when a local resident noticed what was happening. A shout from a witness scared the gang off. That noise made the group stop the beating and run away before they could do any more damage. The victim was left alone, bleeding and in shock in the passage. And though the strike only took a few minutes, it left behind a trail of data that the police would soon start to follow. The probe went into high gear as soon as the police were called. Detectives started by pulling footage from cars that were near Hope Close, finding the cars that were moving through the area during the mugging. This was paired with a massive check of CCTV cameras across the meadows. From those tapes, officers found a grey Skoda Octavia that the gang had used. The car's path became the main lead for the police. By using tracking software, they traced the Skoda's trip into the city, its path through the streets, and its fast exit after the crime was over. The records proved the group had driven straight back toward London, which meant it was a planned strike, not a random local act. The video check also found the gang at a KFC restaurant in Nottingham just before the mugging. This small detail helped the police confirm exactly who was in the car and proved they were all together before the crime. Once the names were known, police raided several homes in London tied to the group. These raids led to arrests and more proof linking the men to the Nottingham crime. One member, Mihai Melu, wasn't there when the police arrived. However, detectives found a specific piece of clothing from the CCTV tapes at his house. When he found out the police had identified him, Melu turned himself in. As all the proof came together, the videos, the car tracking, the dashcam files, and the physical links, the case became impossible to beat. Every man was jailed and charged with the robbery plot. By this point, the probe had moved past just finding the suspects. The timeline, the planning, and the specific jobs each man had were now proven by several different types of evidence. With the case ready, the focus moved to the trial, where the full story of the violence would be told to a jury. The trial took place at Nottingham Crown Court, where the prosecution presented a thorough account of a heist that was pre-arranged and carried out with intentional brutality. Throughout the hearing, personal impact testimonies were presented to the bench. The sufferer recounted fearing for his life during the assault. He detailed the enduring results of the knife wounds, the mental distress, and the shattered self-esteem that ensued. The court acknowledged that the results of the theft reached much further than the bodily harm suffered on that day. All 5 suspects were found guilty of plotting a robbery. The jurors dismissed any claims that specific involvements were insignificant or random, ruling that every individual had willfully participated in a scheme that hinged on trickery, seclusion, and the menace of severe force. Ionel Radu was handed the harshest penalty, a 10-year prison term. The magistrate further specified that Radu is to be expelled from the country upon completing his incarceration. George Cherita received a 7-year jail sentence in absentia after escaping the UK prior to the trial's end. The justice remarked that his flight did little to diminish his liability for baiting the target into the trap. Ionut Stoica was given 8 years behind bars for his part in the raid and his contribution to the plot. Kostel Ili was likewise ordered to serve 8 years, whereas Mihai Melu was condemned to 7 years of incarceration. What are your views on these legal matters and the penalties? Share your opinions in the section below. We want to know your perspective. If this analysis was helpful, remember to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and enable alerts so you never overlook the upcoming chapter.